I have no reason why I feel so tired. It's just all of a sudden I've been feeling tired. I slept in until like 2 yesterday and missed an entire chance to stream. And then as soon as I was getting ready to stream today, I got really tired. Getting old sucks, folks. Don't do it. Big old stretches. Alright, in any case, welcome to the latest installment of Deer and Projector Lights, where I actually managed to watch some newer releases so I could review them, and we're gonna do that once we head into the theater room. So let's do just that. So the first thing, now the thing is, I didn't go out to the theaters. I did manage to find some extra fun. I did realize I have some extra like Cinemark gift cards and gift money that I could use for theatrical for going to the theater at some point. But for right now, I was sticking at home, and so the first thing I watched this past week was the latest from James Wan, Malignant. I'd seen this being advertised for like the last week or so, and I knew it was. I wasn't sure what's coming. I just knew like, oh, new horror movie, whatever. Okay. And then the first thing I hear about it is in a server of mine that I'm in. Someone shared a review that basically called it out as utilizing a lot of turf rhetoric and came off as transphobic. And that definitely raised an eyebrow to me, like, oh, okay, so we're gonna get one of these, huh? Possibility for one of the worst of the year. And it definitely was, but for more than just that take, which I'll get into. The premise deals with a woman who, God, it's so convoluted, I don't even know how to explain it. But yeah, James Wan he developed the story and then went on to direct it. For those who aren't familiar, Wan is one of the guys behind the Saw franchise. He also was the creator of the Insidious franchise for Blumhouse, and has since gone on to direct Fast and Furious 7. I guess Furious 7 is how they break it down. Those names are all convoluted. But he directed the 7th Fast and Furious movie, and then he directed Aquaman. And so he's been moving towards action now, and he seemed to be more into action lately, but he decided to come back for horror, sort of. We'll get into it. The premise deals with a series of murders that are going on that tie into this one woman having some kind of repressed memories. The whole thing opens up in like a psych ward, like a complete ripoff of one of the Halloween movies where like Michael Myers is in the psych ward somewhere, and so and then we flash forward. This is back in the 90s. There's a psych ward thing and something about electric telepathy, where somebody can control, overloads the electricity around them, and then can communicate through radios and cell phones. It's not very well explained, but then we cut to the present, where this woman is having all kinds of her own struggles. She's apparently been trying to conceive and has been having miscarriages, and soon she begins having these memories of these murders happening as though she was there. And over the course of the movie, it turns out that, in fact, let me stop the music. This is throwing me off. It's all this jaunty music, and I'm talking about miscarriages and murders. Um, but the big twist is, without giving too much away, because they do reveal partly halfway through the movie, and it's teased at and it's talked about in the descriptions for it. Basically, that this turns out to be an evil twin story, and and that's as much as I'll say about it. Basically, this woman is dealing with some kind of evil twin, and I'll go into more spoilers in a bit. That way, people can tune out if they don't want to hear any spoilers and watch it for themselves. It's over on HBO Max for the rest of September, and then it's in theaters if you want to venture out. But the plot is only part of my problem with this movie, and that's the thing. I should open with, if you enjoyed this movie, or if you after my review you go on to watch it and you enjoy it, I'm happy for you. That's the one thing as a critic that I've tried to hold myself to, is that I should not hold people's like or dislike of a thing against them, because everybody's tastes are subjective. So if you happen to enjoy something that I did not, then as long as it's not for some horrific reason, like I absolutely despised Sia's movie Music, which is such a stupid title, because now when you have to specify that you hate the movie that she made called Music, and not that you hate her music that she creates as a musician. God. But yeah, I hated Sia's movie. I thought it was just not only absolutely offensive, but just downright terrible. One of the worst movies ever put to film. And if somebody said they liked it I probably would at least, hear them out. And as long as it wasn't because they thought it was an accurate treatment of autism, then we're fine. As long as it's not the reason you liked this movie is because, it turns out it's because it turns out you have these terrible ideas and beliefs, then we're fine. Then it's just a matter of, subjective taste. So if you enjoy this movie, good for you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Because that's the one thing I don't want to do, is go into something actively hating it. I don't want to come out of a movie hating it. I would much rather come out of a movie feeling indifferent. But once again, taste is subjective, and when I watched this, I did not have a good time. So the plot is part of the problem. It's absolutely, completely convoluted and up its own ass. It spends so much time trying to explain itself, it becomes essentially like a dumber version of how Interstellar or Tenet spent so much time expositing and trying to explain how the movie works. And that's kind of the problem here too. When you have to spend most of the movie explaining how the movie works, you've made a bad movie. You can't spend so much of the runtime explaining the mechanics of the gimmick for your movie. You just need to do the thing. In fact, sometimes it's better not to explain the mechanics at all, a la Groundhog Day. You don't need to explain things sometimes. You just need to just let them happen. But that's not the biggest issue for me. I think the biggest issue for me is that it looks cheap, which is fine. It doesn't have to look amazing, but it's also not. It feels like nobody really put a lot of thought into this. It feels like they just rushed it out with the idea and then tried to fill in the gaps of where their cool ideas were. Because there are some parts where you can tell that they put some thought into, and specifically there are points, especially in the second half and in the climax, where Juan turns this from a slasher movie into an action movie, and basically the killer gains superpowers. And it feels like that was kind of the idea he was going for, and that he wanted to get to that point, but didn't care how. And you can feel that a lot in this movie, in the presentation. There are so many points where the dialogue and the performances make it feel like nobody really cares what's going on. It's like they know that somebody's skipping over this part of the movie, so they don't put any effort into it. And it really does make the movie less enjoyable for that reason. Yeah, the dialogue in this is just bad on even a horror movie level. Like this would be fine if the movie looked like it was shot on Super 8 film and came from the 70s, but you could try a little harder than this, James Wan. You don't have to like completely not give a shit. Uh but yeah, the killer is fine. That's the thing, is that they tried to make the killer into they tried to do things with the killer that it took series like Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th at least 3 entries in before it got that convoluted and stupid. But it's like they crammed an entire franchise's worth of stupid slasher backstory into one movie. And it didn't make me enjoy this slasher at all. Gabriel, the name of the killer in this movie, is just ultimately completely forgettable. Like, when you go through the pantheon of slashers, even the lower tier ones tend to have something about them that makes them memorable in some way. You get the big ones like Leatherface, Michael Myers, Ghostface, Freddy, Jason. And even then, you go further down, you get things like, what's a good, who's a good slasher? Kane, the guy that the wrestler plays in See No Evil. Is it See No Evil? That's maybe not See No Evil. There's basically there's some WWE horror movie where one of their wrestlers plays a slasher villain, and he's somewhat memorable in those films from what I remember seeing. But Gabriel here, I mean, there's one part you can't forget, but that's tied into the plot, and the actual kills are fine. But once again, there's nothing really about this movie that really works, and yet I'm seeing so many people like lavish praise upon it, and I want to say it feels like it's a bit much, because like, even, I don't know, maybe there's just a different criteria if you're a slasher or like a bloody horror fan. I guess my thing is, like, I don't mind horror when it's stupid if the rest of the movie is good. Like, if there are other parts of the movie that are good, and there's enough of those parts that compensate for the bad parts, then I'm fine. It's why I forgive, like, a lot of those 80s slashers started off fairly decently. And, they were B movies, they weren't A movies, but they started off decently. And they had, interesting stuff. Like the kids were stupid, but then, they were still enough going on during the movie that endeared you to it. And I didn't get any of that from this. I didn't think Gabriel was that compelling of a villain. The rest of the characters are either annoying or just completely stupid. The action is fine, but it feels out of place. It feels like it feels like if all of a sudden a Friday the 13th movie turned into an action movie, and it feels weirdly like it feels like it doesn't quite work. Like, it's one thing if that was the intention the whole way through, but it doesn't really become a thing until much later in the movie. And then by the end, it's just a full-on action movie, and it's not even it's almost like a superhero movie. And it's so weirdly written that it's just as convoluted as some comic book movies, but that doesn't make it any better, because the actors in this aren't really any good. Nothing against them. I'm sure they're fine enough, but the way they're directed here is, it's like they didn't have any direction and they were just going with whatever. and I didn't really feel like they were giving very good performances, which either means James Wan wasn't directing their acting performances, or he was directing them badly, or he just left them off to do their own thing. Who knows? I don't know how he directs. I've never been on one of his sets, but yeah, like it goes off on weird, like, and that's the thing is, like, for a horror movie, it just isn't scary. I didn't feel scared watching any of this movie. And maybe that wasn't the intention, but at least with like the Insidious movies and the Saw movies, there was some intention of fear to be had in this, to be had in those. Here, I don't feel scared because I feel like Gabriel's too stupid of a slasher villain to really inspire fear. There's nothing about Gabriel that really is intimidating or scary. Like, you compared Gabriel to Freddy. Freddy's whole thing is supernatural. He is within the dream world, and he's otherwise, where he has the most power, and it takes somebody of great mental fortitude to break him out of that in order to kill him. There isn't anything like that. So I mean, like, that's the thing is, Freddy has intimidation based on the fact that he's untouchable unless you're able to get him out of the dream world and into the real world. And even then, that's not a guarantee that he won't survive. All Gabriel has going for him is that he is that he's hard to kill, which is the same thing Jason had, but Jason at least had an intimidating appearance about him. He's a big linebacker looking dude with a hockey mask on and a machete, and he just is a relentless force of nature coming down on you. He never says anything. Same with Michael Myers. You know, there is this giant dude in a mask with a sharp object. He's coming down at you, and he doesn't even say anything. You can't reason with him. You can't, argue with him. You can't, you can't endear yourself to him. You can't even intimidate him. He's just a relentless force of nature bearing down on you. Or in some cases, a relentless force of supernatural nature. Or, demonic nature, whatever you want to call it. Gabriel talks too much to be intimidating in that way, but what he says isn't endearing enough the way that Freddy would turn into a sort of shock jock. Like a comedic, or Chucky would be this sort of comedic guy who would laugh at your death. But Gabriel isn't endearing in that way either. He's not his dialogue isn't funny. It's trying to be intimidating without coming off of it at all. It's like a 13-year-old is trying to be intimidating at you. And he says just the dumbest things, and he's not intimidating in the slightest. But yeah, Gabriel in this is just not a good villain. The characters overall just aren't very good. The cops in this are just absolutely awful cops, and it feels like somebody it feels like the writers watched just a marathon of Law and Order and figured that's how cops are, and then half-assed the script based on that, half-assed the characters based on that, but they really are just terrible, terrible cops that have no idea what they're doing. And then, at one point, one of the cops actually says the line when a character who's clearly sitting there, like, neck brace on and an oxygen tubes, and it's got the EKG, beep, 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 beep. So she's clearly there, unconscious. The cop comes up to the nurse and asks, "Why won't she wake up?" "She's in a coma, detective." Actual lines from this movie. A detective has to ask the question, why won't this person who's unconscious wake up? To which a nurse has to reply to said detective, because she is in a coma. As though none of this could be, as though he rolled a natural one on his insight check or something like that, Just absolutely terrible detective work. Not to mention the fact that the lead girl's sister at one point tells the cops, "Hey, we can help," by doing what? The cops know what they're doing. How are you gonna help? It's weird lines, and then just delivered poorly all around. It really is just some of the worst acting I've seen in a horror movie, a genre notorious for some terrible acting. And I think that's the thing, is that if this looked cheaper, if this was shot more like a grungy grindhouse movie, I would probably give it more of a pass, because that seemed to be the intention. This looks way too nice to be a grindhouse style movie, but it's not good enough to be like an A tier movie. And especially, that's the thing, is like when they try to be scary, at a lot of points I'm just laughing out loud. I'm just laughing at how stupid everything is. And by that point, this was like barely halfway into the movie, and then by that point you've already lost me, because I'm not scared. First I wasn't scared, and now I'm just laughing at you. So yeah, maybe that was I don't know if that was the point or not. Maybe that's what people thought that was the intention, but yeah, it really just did not work for me. In the same, I think it's too much of a hot mess, because it doesn't quite know what it wants to do. It doesn't, because it tries to do the slasher thing for good chunks, but it's not very good at it. And then it just devolves into an action movie, at which point, what the hell is even going on? And by that point, you just kind of throw your hands up in the air and give up and be like, all right, fine, whatever, James Wan. You just wanted to do some shit in between the Aquaman movies, I guess. It's just that image. That was me watching this movie. But I won't give away too much of this of the big twist in the plot, in case anybody wants to see it. As for the transphobic bits, the parts that that people were implying could be taken as transphobic and used some TERF rhetoric, TERF being trans exclusionary radical feminist. I immediately saw that when it came up. Like, it takes about 90 minutes into the movie to get to that point, and it deals with the revelation in the plot. So I won't spoil that for you, but just know that the way they explain Gabriel and the plot of this movie is is dangerously close to a way that a lot of TERFs and a lot of transphobic people talk about trans women. And it really is just like that's the thing, is like, I never got the feeling that it was intentional, that they intended to be that kind of hurtful, that kind of harmful to trans women. I think it's just complete and utter laziness and ignorance. The fact that so little thought was put into how they wrote this movie, that when they tried to explain the villain's origins, they ended up being transphobic. I find, going by Akram's razor, the simplest solution is usually the most correct. I think it's more, and there's another quote along those lines. Here we go. Who said this? Oh, it's another razor. There's Occam's razor, which is the simplest solution, is usually the best. But there's also Hanlon's razor, which is never attribute to malice what is adequately explained by stupidity. And yeah, that's basic. It's another sort of rhetorical. What do you call that? what are these called? Yeah, adage or rule of thumb, sort of rhetorical philosophy. What is a philosophical razor? Now I'm getting Hitchens. Oh, Hitchens has a razor, and Hume, and Sagan. Well, Sagan has a standard. A razor is a principle or rule of thumb that allows one to eliminate, shave off unlikely explanations for a phenomenon. So Occam says that simpler explanations are more likely to be correct. Hanlon says never attribute to malice what can be adequately explained by stupidity. And then for Hitchens, what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. So yeah. And to go along with that, Carl Sagan's standard, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So interesting stuff. Anyway, yeah, this is, I feel like, a Hanlon's razor thing. This isn't malice so much, given their track records and their history. It's not like Juan has a long-standing history of transphobic comments that I know of. He may. I mean, he and the writers may have a long-standing history of transphobic comments that I'm unaware of. But if somebody is aware of it, please make it known. But given that there is not any evidence to prior existing transphobic beliefs, and the fact that it's not very prominent in the movie, the fact that it's basically a throwaway line in the exposition about the villain. The fact that it's just thrown away like that makes me think that it's not malicious intent, that it's just laziness and not wanting to, and not putting that much thought into the writing. But yeah, that's just one part of the whole movie. And for members of the trans community, be aware of that fact, that there's definitely something that could be that could be more harmful, if more harmful, and there's definitely not a lot of thought put into it, so be aware of that fact. But I don't think it's as malicious. It's not malicious. It's just pure, unadulterated ignorance and laziness more than anything else. It's not to mention the fact that so much of the battle between the protagonist and Gabriel are telepathic battles. It's like, you get this problem a lot with the X-Men and with Stephen King a bunch. Telepathic battles are just like not cinematic. Like, they're great when you can imagine them in your mind, and they're great when they're on the page and you can just use so many words to describe what's going on. You can't really visualize telepathy. And they try to in this movie, and it's really weird and not very well, and it's just kind of, it's trying to add all these flourishes that don't really amount to anything. And I think it's just the fact that telepathic battles aren't very good. Like, any kind of psychic battles that don't include throwing things around with telekinesis are really hard to film and put to film. Like, my mind always goes to that shot in Revenge of the Sith where Obi-Wan and Anakin are fighting on Mustafar, and they use the force at each other, but it just looks like they're trying to high-five and they can't. It's just really hard to try and cinematically create psychic fighting, and especially telepathic fighting. Oh, by the way, there's a women's prison scene, and it looks like utter shit. But yeah, it's like, the one thing I will give this movie is there are some shots during the climax that look good. So once again, Juan is not a bad action director, but this isn't an action movie. It's a horror movie, and it's a badly executed horror movie with some good action shots towards, sprinkled in it. And it just feels like it feels like such a waste of the premise, and honestly, it feels like Juan wasn't really trying. And he may have been trying, or he may not have been. This may have just been an idea he had, and he just kind of half-assed it because he wanted to get it out there. I don't know. I don't know the history behind this movie. I don't know how much he cared about this, but it doesn't show up on screen. All I'm really seeing is just a bad horror movie that suddenly turns into an action movie partway through. And honestly, I think there's better examples of horror and action. Just go watch the old Blade movies in that regard. They're way better horror action movies than this. But yeah, Malignant, I genuinely don't really think you should watch. If this is more up your alley, give it a shot. I know Tiger Bun would probably love this. Bun would probably love this. It just wasn't for me, This next one also wasn't for me that much, but it was still better, I think. And that is Amazon Cinderella. Technically better than Malignant, I'll give it that. So I don't know how many of you saw this one, but Amazon did a Cinderella. It is not Rodgers and Hammerstein Cinderella. It isn't even Disney, some take on Disney Cinderella. This is some whole new thing where Camila Cabello is Cinderella, which is basically herself, but she's supposed to be Cinderella, and it's basically a vehicle for her. And then it becomes a jukebox musical for good chunks of the movie, where they just sing cover songs. And yeah, I mean, we're all familiar with the Cinderella story at this point. The only real changes they have are that Idina Menzel as the stepmom is a little nicer. She's probably the nicest the Cinderella stepmom has been in one of these movies. But and not to mention the fact that Cinderella is trying to be more of an entrepreneur in this movie, where she's trying to sell dresses as she makes, and apparently women can't sell things. I don't get the conflict in this movie. It's so anachronistic too that you can't tell exactly what's going on, because there's like the big thing with the prince having a sister who wants to be the ruler, but she can't because she's a woman. But then there's like women all over the place, just seemingly doing things seem to be egalitarian enough that women can do all kinds of stuff throughout the town. But I don't exactly get where it's too it sounds too modern to try and play as if it is medieval in setting. So it's so weird that I'm not quite sure what exactly they were going for, but it's fine. Like, I didn't hate it, but it really wasn't for me. It isn't even that good of an adaptation of Cinderella. Like, the jukebox, at first I was like, oh, it's a musical, that's fine enough, I guess. And then I realized, like, 2 songs, by the second song, like, oh, it's a jukebox musical. Great. And that's the thing, is jukebox musicals aren't fine. They are fine. Jukebox musicals aren't the problem. The problem is trying to make the songs fit a narrative. A lot of times they don't make sense. Like, unless you're basically turning a concept album into a stage show, more often than not, the songs aren't going to fit to a narrative. Like, the only time I can think where, like the only other way around that is if you're doing like Jersey Boys, a biography of the band, in which case you're just singing the songs in order of their, you're just singing their songs without real connection to the plot so much as they're singing this song either diegetically or non-diegetically. But here it's just like perfect example. During the ball, it opens with a group of women singing "What a Man" by TLC. And then after the first verse of that, and the second, and the first repeat, and a repeat of the chorus, it goes to the Prince, who starts singing "Seven Nation Army" by the White Stripes. What a Man I can kind of get. What does Seven Nation Army have to do with anything? Like, Seven Nation Army, I think he's trying to call the women a Seven Nation Army. But like, it's so weirdly put in there and has no real, and like the emotion they're trying to go for doesn't really work, and it's just badly executed. It's a badly executed jukebox musical where the songs have no bearing on the plot or on the character moments, because you can't make these songs fit this fit this emotion that they're feeling or fit this plot point that they're telling, because they're not about that. Or they're sometimes too on the nose, like literally a bunch of women singing "What a Man" at the Prince they're trying to marry. But yeah, this is clearly a vehicle for Camila Cabello, and she's just not very good. She's not a good actress. That's not to say that she's couldn't be a good actress, but she's giving that pop star kind of performance where if you've seen any of the sort of movies that star a pop singer trying to break into movies, you know this kind of performance. You get this from Britney Spears in her movies, or from Beyonce in her first couple of roles, and then especially from Mariah Carey in Glitter, or Christina Aguilera in Burlesque. They're so unable to portray their own character that all you can really see is just them reading their lines. And yeah, she just, I think she needs a role that actively makes her go out of her pop star self and into an entirely new persona. Play an entirely character entirely out of her known image, kind of like how Zendaya is able to go from through different kinds of roles. She can be a sort of alt punk girl version, alt punk MJ in Spider-Man, or she could be she can play a sort of alien character in Dune. Zendaya has shown a lot more range, and even Ariana Grande, when she has acted, has shown more range as an actress than most pop stars do. And yeah, Camila Cabello cannot carry this film, and the people around her aren't that great. Like, even Idina Menzel as the stepmom is just kind of given scraps. It just feels like, we have Idina Menzel, and then we have her sing some songs and not really have a character arc until like the last 20 minutes. But I think the worst offender in this movie, I mean, you've got James Corden, who has slowly been becoming my nemesis, in that there is nothing I have seen with James Corden where James Corden was the good thing about it. I'm trying to think of something good that he was in that I enjoyed despite him, because there's definitely nothing I enjoyed because of him I can think of. We've got his parent. Yeah, in Trolls he's like a side character. Oh, there is one. There is the one thing, and it was before he got his talk show, and that is he was the baker in Into the Woods, and he was good in that. So there's that one. There is the one thing that he was good in, and that I enjoyed him for. But looking through the rest of it, you've got him as Peter Rabbit sucks. Him as Buster for Jones in Cats wasn't good. What else? His character in Trolls is completely forgettable and unnecessary. Yeah, I think the only good thing I've seen him in where he was also good. Oh God, he was also in Gulliver's Travels back in the day. I think he was the Lilliputian sidekick to Jack Black. But yeah, and he was in the Three Musketeers movie. Ew. So yeah, I think the only really good thing where he was good in it was Into the Woods. Everything else is just him doing. Oh, that's right. He was in the Emoji Movie too. Yeah, once he started his I think everything after his talk show was proof that he wasn't. He was just not very funny or charismatic or likable. But that's just me. But yeah, he plays one of the mice in this, and he plays the human version of the mouse when it's turned into a footman. And the mice are the ugliest thing in the entire movie. The mice look like CG creations from the early 2000s. They look like an unfinished rendering of Stuart Little at a lot of points. Or they look like, oh God, there's another really bad mouse effect from a movie in like the 2000s. I can't remember what it was. Ugh, now it's gonna bother me. But yeah, like the mice in here, they don't look like they have fur. They look like they're flat. They look like, they look like they're Play-Doh. It's so bad. There's no reason for the mice to look that bad. Like, that just means you spent so little time rendering out the mice that they couldn't even look passable. Like, they're so very clearly CGI, and they're so very clearly not finished rendering, because the hair on them looks like garbage. And they bear no real, like, they're just there for really bad comic relief, and they're not even utilized that much. Like, it's like the opposite of the Disney animated Cinderella, where the mice completely dominated the movie in the Disney one. Here, the mice are just like cameos, and they're not very good either. But they've also, I will say, you got Minnie Driver and Pierce Brosnan as the King and the Queen. They do throw a little joke at Pierce Brosnan for not being able to sing, which was cute. I'll give them that, calling out the fact that Pierce Brosnan can't sing, and then, you remember that, oh, wait, somebody did try to put him in a musical twice and make him sing. Oh, God. But yeah, but then the best part is Billy Porter in the only real differential thing this movie has going for it. The only thing different in its adaptation that this movie has going for it is, instead of a fairy godmother, there's a fabulous godmother played by Billy Porter. And Billy Porter is the best thing in this entire movie, and he only gets one scene, and it sucks. Like, he narrates the rest of the movie when there's a narrator, but there's only one scene of Billy Porter on screen, and he's the best part of the movie. And everything else, and when he's gone, everything else just kind of like meh. Billy Porter is the only real reason to watch this movie, and it's only for one scene, so you just might as well watch that scene on like YouTube or something. But yeah, it really is just not a very good adaptation of Cinderella. I need to go back and rewatch it, but I feel like Ever After was the only time somebody could make the Cinderella plot work, because the Cinderella plot, I mean, the fairy tale, it's not very well thought out and it's kind of stupid, but I feel like the only way it has worked is when they did it more realistically through in the movie Ever After, which I've seen before a couple of times at least, but I never remember it because it's always in the background, and it's or like people are watching it on a we were like watching it on a bus or something while we were driving the band to Washington D.C. or something like that. But yeah, Ever After, I need to sit down and watch and digest at some point. But yeah, it is cheesy. So if you're into cheesy musicals, this is the kind of movie for you. But even then, I feel like if you want a good, this feels like a lower tier Disney Channel original movie. This feels like a lesser Descendants, so to speak. I think like this feels like something the Disney Channel would throw together with one of their rising starlets in the mid 2000s or the 2010s. It just isn't very well. It looks cheap, and the dancing isn't very good. The song usage is all over the place. It doesn't. It feels like a TV movie more than like a full length feature, something you would watch on the big screen. And yeah, it. I feel like Disney could do it slightly better for a decom, but this isn't. Yeah, this is fine if you have the tolerance and you actually enjoy things like Freeform or ABC Family original movies. This will probably be for you, but personally speaking, it's one of the lower tier Cinderella adaptations, and the only real reason to even give it a shot is Billy Porter, I think. But then we got one more thing I watched. I was holding off on it because I wasn't sure if there were going to be more, but tragically, I don't think there are going to be, because what we're talking about is one of the latest from Disney Plus and Pixar, and that is Doug Days. Doug Days is the same is similarly the follow. It's basically like a collection of shorts based around the character Doug and Ed Asner's character from Up. And whereas Monsters at Work had a narrative and had a plot through line that tied into the original movie, this feels like a collection of shorts they made, for like a DVD, for like the special edition DVD of Up or something like that. There isn't a real narrative structure going on here. It's just vignettes featuring Doug and Ed Asner's character. And I will say, whereas Monsters at Work looked a little bit cheaper in terms of the motion, in terms of some of the animation in it, Doug Days looks gorgeous. Doug Days looks like it's set in the Up. It looks like a straight continuation of Up. Looks just as good as that movie did. And sadly, because we lost Ed Asner, this counts as if this is probably going to be his final performance. And he's great. He was so good as oh god, what was this character's name in Up? Uh what was his character's name? It's been a while. Carl Fredrickson. Um, he was so good as Carl. He absolutely nailed that kind of performance, and he's so good in this. It's mainly focuses on Doug, and I believe it's the same voice actor from the movie, Bob Peterson. Oh, I swear it's like one of the actual. Oh, he's from Worcester, Ohio. He's also Mr. Ray, and he was the original. So okay, that was him as Roz in Monsters at Work. I kept thinking that it wasn't the original voice actor for Roz and that they got a sound alike, but it was him. He just sounded off for some reason. It sounded too high for some reason, but yeah, I think he's an anime. I think he's an animator, animation department. Story contribution, story artist, senior creative team. Oh, he actually got to direct some of the episodes. Andy was the co-director on Up. Um, so yeah, he's a Pixar guy. He's just a technical. He's on the technical side, and then he's able to do enough voices that they actually brought him in to do multiple voices. But yeah, it. Oh my god, he was the voice of Jerry in Jerry's Game. Oh my god. Oh, that's crazy. That's wild. Anyway, um, you have Bob Peterson returning as Doug the dog, and he is the reason to watch this show. These 5 episodes. He. It's like a complete continuation from Up. Not. I mean, I mentioned that with the animation, but in terms of Doug's Doug's portrayal, in terms of Carl, in terms of in terms of the animation and the look of the show, everything feels like a direct follow up to Up, and it works so well. But yeah, and then the stories for each short are very dog centric. You've got the fact that there's one episode that's just straight up dogs hate fireworks, and I honestly think that was the saddest one. Like, as much as this show can be sad, because all I can think is, oh, poor doggy has no idea about the fireworks and he's losing his poor doggy mind. It makes you feel even worse for dogs that can't talk, real world dogs that can't talk, when you see them go through what Doug's going through. Oh, and that's just what happens to dogs. Oh, it's the worst. But yeah, other than that, there's like a recurring squirrel character that Doug fights throughout the show. Uh, one episode has Carl helping take care of a group of puppies for this woman for some reason. And then the last episode sees Russell coming over and making multiple collars to try and get other animals to talk. And then it becomes Doug talking to the squirrel and talking to this blue jay that's up in a tree. And it's all a bunch of things. Like, this could easily be its own series of Doug learning how the world works around him, since he was coming off of working for a mad scientist, and now he's readjusting to the life around him, and he learns things like a child, and he could be there could be like a really solid kids show in that way. But yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous animation. Bob Peterson is hilarious as Doug. Ed Asner was wonderful as Carl, and the whole thing is really just an excellent, probably the best TV Pixar has made for Disney Plus yet so far. I think it's way better than Monsters at Work, mainly because it's not trying too hard. Whereas Monsters at Work had a lot going for it, narratively speaking, and had character arcs. It's trying to be a full-on TV show, whereas Doug Days feels more like a collection of shorts. And and sadly, this is the last we'll see of Ed Asner as Carl. This may be the end of Up being featured, because unless they either want to write Carl out of it, or they want to replace Carl with a sound alike, which I don't really see them doing. Um, at least for right now, because they don't seem to be wanting to go that route at Pixar. Because that's the thing, is like, they could have. I actually think they should have gotten sound alikes for Mike and Sully, because of how much older John Goodman and Billy Crystal sound. But I don't know that I would want a sound alike, unless the stories they would tell with Doug and Carl and Russell would be any better. But I don't really see that happening. I'm just, for what it is, it's a lovely last little bit from the Up universe, and I enjoy. I happily enjoy it, and I highly recommend you check it out if you have Disney Plus, or if you have access. If you can find access to it. It's just such a good show. I say show, but it's much more of a just a collection of shorts, and it is the best thing I watched this past these past couple of weeks. It is I could I could just watch it on a loop every time I'm feeling down and just be like have Doug be like, "Hi there, I will get you, squirrel. Hello, small dogs." He almost talks like Ed from Ed, Ed and Eddie in a way. Just mad himbo energy coming off of Doug. Yeah, highly recommend Doug Days over on Disney Plus. But I think but that's sadly gonna do it for us. So let's head back to the library before we head out. As I also find somebody else to raid. Let me see who all's live. But yeah, what's coming out next week or this coming week? What's coming out this week? Cry Macho, the latest from Clint Eastwood, featuring Dwight Yoakam. There's a name I haven't heard in forever. Blue Bayou from Justin Chon. It's about a Korean guy raised in Louisiana Bayou. Oh my God, The Eyes of Tammy Faye. The Tammy Faye biopic with Jessica Chastain. Directed by Michael Showalter. Wow. Did not see that coming. Oh, hey, and there's another Nicolas Cage horror movie called Prisoners of the Ghostland. So yeah, I don't know what all's coming up in the theaters near me. I don't know what's coming to streaming. I do want to catch up on some Netflix though, because there's a whole slew of Netflix original movies that I have been neglecting to watch, and I need to catch up and do like a marathon one day. But yeah, let's see who we can raid. Who all's streaming right now? Oh, you know who we'll go see? I'm gonna go see Pixel, Invader Pixel, friend of the show and Pixel. I'm gonna go see her, go raid her channel. So thanks for anybody who tuned in. We'll see you all next week, and hopefully I'll watch a little bit more than I did today, and hopefully I can actually get out on Monday. I want to keep this a Monday show, but I also need to figure out a schedule, which means which is what I'm playing around with this week, and hopefully, and maybe even the rest of the month. I don't even know, but I'm trying to figure out the best times to get viewers to actually watch. So I don't know. Maybe it's not even about finding a good time. Maybe it's just having a time, and then people can always come in and check it out. So we'll worry about that later. Hopefully get away from this guerrilla streaming and onto a schedule soon. So we'll see you folks later, and let's go say hi to Pixel. Bye.